Look at that thing, will you? Gotta love a muscle bike. Boot spoiler on that thing there, I guarantee it's never been over 110 kilometres an hour. There's another one. Touring cars have always been very popular in Australia. And of course the ultimate destination for any touring car fan is Bathurst. And oh, what a road trip. Man, I'll tell you a story.
Just because we're dumbasses don't mean you can be too. So don't do any of the we do at home.
So, I was an apprentice, and me and my mates used to, you know, we loved our hot rods. And we had, like, this is back in the day when you could pick them up for a couple of $1,000s. We had Tiranas and Monaros, and we had, you know, hotted up Geminis and all these really cool street cars, GT Falcons, and we used to love to go to Bathurst and watch the touring cars. And this was a time when we still had Group C touring cars in Australia, and it was always like, we used to do these, well, there was a couple of times we went down and spent a week down there, but often what we would do is a suicide run, what we called a suicide run. We'd leave work on the Friday night and drive to Bathurst. Now, Bathurst is a town in rural New South Wales, and it was about a 12-hour drive on a good day from Brisbane. And of course we had these cars, and I had a Tirana and other different bloody cars over the journey, and Tiranas were terrible. They had such a small fuel tank, and of course back in the day we used to, you know, you'd drive along with your foot in the back of the bloody headlight. There wasn't a lot of radars out in the middle of the night, and you know, you'd be sitting on 100 miles an hour and burning through the fuel, and there wasn't a lot of fuel stations between towns, like big services, big roadhouses and things like that. They just were very far and few between. There were a few, and then you get into some towns and they had no petrol stations. Sorry, they'd have petrol stations, but they'd be closed. Yeah, we got caught out a few times. Anyway, I won't digress because this is quite the story. We were set to go to Bathurst. There was me, my best mate Henry, another good mate Grant, and another fella. Anyway, we'll set the scene. We've decided we're going to go to Bathurst in my 1963 Chevy, because it had plenty of bloody room, and a massive boot. You could fit 5 people comfortably across the back seat, 4 across the front seat if you wanted to. And even though it had a mild 350 small block in it, it was reasonably economical and had a fuel tank that was big enough for the journey to get us from town to town and still, you know, cover the miles at a reasonable rate of knots. So it's Friday night. We're about to leave. That's the night we were going to leave, on the Friday, and I knock off work and the alternator shits itself. Now, you got to remember, I was only a kid, and probably still in my teens, I think. wasn't all that smart, and not only that, you just didn't have the availability like you do now, where you could drop into an auto store and buy a bloody alternator. Not that I probably could have afforded it anyway. You had to take the damn thing to an auto electrician, and he would rebuild it and give it back to you a week later. But anyway, Friday night we weren't going to be getting an alternator, so we essentially wrote it off. That's it, we're not going anywhere. So I ended up at Henry's place, and probably rode my bike over or whatever. Anyway, we sat around and we bowled over a bottle of Bundaberg rum and came up with a cunning plan. So we didn't want to take Henry's car. He had a HQ Monaro with a 308 on nitrous, and it was just way too expensive to run, and we wouldn't have made it from town to town without running out of fuel. But we did own an FE Holden. It was a 1956 FE Holden, and the bloody thing was shoved in underneath his old man's house over in Morningside in Brisbane, and this bottle of rum made that sound like a really good idea. Let's take the FE. So we rang Grant. We said it's back on, but Grant had changed his plans, and his girlfriend had come over, was spending the night at his place. He said, "Oh, can Julie come?" And we were a little bit, oh, well, I suppose so, but the only reason we agreed really was because we needed the money. There's no way Henry and I could afford to get down there on our own. We needed a third cash cow. So the plan was set. So we drove the Monaro over to Morningside and picked up the FE Holden. Now, this thing was completely unprepared. Yeah! It was completely unprepared. It shouldn't have been on the damn road, let alone making a 12-hour trip to friggin' Bathurst. But anyway, that bottle of rum made it sound like a good idea, so off we went. And we headed over to Morningside, and on the way we dropped into Grant's place, and he said, "Yep, no worries, pick me up on the way back, I'll see Dad, borrow a bit of money, I'll grab some camping gear." And we said, "Oh, grab a tent for us." Yeah, no worries. And that was it. That was our pre-trip prep. So anywho, we head back to Morningside and pick this car up. Now we're driving back to Grant's place, and already I can't even remember what time of night it was. It was probably like 9-10 o'clock at night already. Nah, couldn't have been, because we went to the bottle of Desert and bought more grog. But it was late. It was like 8-9 o'clock, and Henry and I were driving along Creek Road, and Brisbaneites will know where that is. And we're talking, and we're just chatting along, and I look up and the traffic lights had turned red, and Henry had a habit of talking to you like this while he was driving, so he wasn't watching the road in front of him. And I pointed to the lights and I said, "You're going to stop?" And he went, "Oh shit," and he hit the brakes, and one wheel locked up. And we drifted sideways through this red light intersection and just missed cleaning up the rear end of a police car coming out of the green light. So we dropped the gear and disappeared. It was an old 3-speed column shift, back in the second, off down the hill we went, and this poor old copper had to shoot up the road a couple of kilometres to get a gap in the median strip to turn his car around. So we were pretty fortunate in that respect, and then we did a left-hand turn up into some new housing estate and disappeared up and hid in the bush, and we could see him. He knew we'd turned down there because the old cross flies would have left a nice big black mark as we exited stage left. Let me tell you from some lessons from a ill-spent youth: if you steal a car, and it's a country like Australia where we drive on the left, you always turn left. Always turn left. You don't have to cross that second setter. You don't have to cross that second line of traffic. Anyway, you didn't hear that. So yeah, we're hidden in the bush, and we had to hide there for about an hour. The bastard wouldn't leave. Eventually he gave up on us and he took off, and then we were able to head off. So we pick up Grant. Seriously, mate? So we pick up Grant and we start the journey off to Bathurst. Reasonably incident free. We swing by Bathurst, pick up some more grog, and then we decided at some point in the journey, and I can't even remember where it was, that we were going to take a shortcut. You all know what a shortcut is. The longest distance between 2 points. So anyway, we headed off from we're off on the shortcut, and it was a bloody gravel road, and the car was hammered, and it ended up punching the shock absorbers through the top of the shock mounts, and they came through the floor of the boot and were flapping like a dying duck. So we're riding on the springs on the rear with Grant and Julie and all our gear in the boot. Oh, Grant and Julie went in the boot; they were in the back seat. So she was a bit floaty. Anyway, we kept on pushing, but we kept also being driven crazy by the noise and the smell of a blown cylinder head to manifold gasket. So the exhaust manifold gasket was leaking badly, to the point where, you know, we were already that far behind schedule, and we pulled up at Dubbo in the middle of the night and decided to park in the Repco car park, and we went in the next morning when they opened on Saturday morning. Yeah, we went in and bought a new gasket and fitted it in the car park. Now remember, this is Saturday morning. We're already meant to be in Bathurst by this stage. We're only in Dubbo, but anyway, that's life. So we did that, and no dramas. It got us then to Bathurst with no other issues en route. And while we're there, we had a bloody great time. And we painted Brock Race this in 56 all over the side of it, and had a bit of fun in town, and just generally enjoyed the weekend, enjoyed the racing. And then at the end of the race, we used to always park as close to the exit gate as we could and walk a distance to the track so that we wouldn't get caught in the bloody bottleneck traffic trying to get out of the place. And we wouldn't hang around for the presentation. As soon as the checkered flag dropped, we were gone. Anyway, so that was the plan. We all start to head back to the car. Well, there was no Grant. Grant decided to hang around and watch the bloody presentation. Anyway, eventually came out, and we headed off, and I was deemed the least drunk, or the most sober, so I was the designated driver. Now, there was a couple of idiosyncrasies to driving this car. One, it didn't like going over 70 miles an hour. so we had to keep it under 70 mile an hour because it used to carry on a bit and overheat and whatever. It also had completely flogged out gear shift linkages. So anyone who's ever driven a column shift manual, you'll know, like the old 3-speeds. On this particular one, you had to go from first into neutral, flick the lever through the neutral gate before shifting into second. If you tried to go straight from first into second, it would jam in the bloody linkages and you'd be stuck halfway through gear change, which required getting out under the car, freeing it up, and anyway, so we just didn't do that. But anyway, I'm the most sober and we're driving home and we're somewhere between Wellington and Orange, and I think it was about halfway between Wellington and Orange. Everyone else is passed out in the car, they're all sleeping. I'm driving and I was stuck behind a truck, and I think this guy was starting to get the nods because he'd slow down and then he'd speed up, and then he'd slow down and then he'd speed up. And eventually I got a good enough gap on the highway that I could get around him, so I went back to second gear and headed off to overtake this this truck. Pushed it up to about 70 mile an hour or more, pulled in front of the truck, and poof, the windscreen turned brown, and what it was the top tank had blown off the radiator. So the top tank had separated from the core and it pumped all the muddy water all over the bloody windscreen. Couldn't see a thing, pulled over straight away, and we were faced with this disaster on the side of the road halfway between Wellington and Orange. So we had hundreds of kilometres to get to Wellington. So what we did was we found a container on the side of the road. We started trying to sop water up out of the table drain. We took the radiator cap off the radiator so it wouldn't pressurise, and we just drove very slowly, and we're talking 30 mile an hour or less along the highway, and we'd have to stop at every 5 kilometres there was a post, like a mile post. We'd pull up at that and check the level, keep an eye on the temperature gauge. It's a Sunday night, we're supposed to be at work the next morning. Anyway, we stopped at a farmhouse. At one stage during the escapade, I was trying to find some water, and I fell in, we were in some farmer's paddock, and I fell in a sheep dip. So it was getting worse, you know. You fall in a sheep dip in the middle of the bloody night in dark paddock. So anyway, we found another farmer's house, and after an exchange with some not so happy dogs, we were able to secure enough water to get us through to Wellington. Now we kept pressing on with this radiator, and but we had enough water, you know. We just kept going and kept going until we got to Dubbo, and we decided that's it, we've had enough. The day's gone, like it was middle of the night. We're not going to get home. Let's just pull up here, spend the night in the car, and in the morning we'll source another radiator from the wreckers or something, and that'll get us home. But so we pulled up under some bridge and we were sleeping in the car, and then in the middle of the night with this bang bang on the window, I look up and it's Officer Plod with his flashlight. What are you mob doing? Got a car trouble, we're spending the night in the car, we're going to fix it in the morning. No, you're not, there's no room in town for you boys here, keep moving. But we got no buts. You need to keep moving, get out of town. There's no room in the inn. So very pissed off we were. We drove off, and just outside, it might have been Wellington actually, or Dubbo, I can't even remember, it's that many years ago. There was a roadhouse, a Shell roadhouse, and we pulled up there, and the guy behind the counter said, you know, 5-minute Araldite is reasonably good at holding radiators together, or, you know, emergency repairs. Because that's right, in Wellington we bought a heap of radiator putty and tried to seal the tank and then leave the cap cracked so it wouldn't pressurise, and that's what got us as far as Dubbo. And then in Dubbo we stripped all that putty out and we replaced it with 5-minute Araldite, and I got to say that stuff did work okay. It turns out that the police were having a few issues in town with some rogues, and they felt it wasn't safe for us to stay there, which is why they asked us to move on. We didn't know that at the time. The guy in the service station told us. Anywho, so we've got this Araldited up radiator, and we're heading for home, but it's already the next day. You know, it's Monday almost. And because we had the cap cracked, of course the temperature in the radiator was getting high, and we had to stop a lot to let it cool down and just top up the water that it had expelled. And we'd be playing bloody handball in the middle of the highway with a tennis ball, keep ourselves amused. Eventually we pull into Boggabilla, and there's a service station, and the radiator has given up for the last time. The Araldite's let go, it's spewed its contents everywhere, we're doomed. And we pull up and we thought, well, we'll get some petrol, we'll fill up a container full of water, and we'll try and limp into Gundawindi and see if we can find a wrecking yard and try and buy a radiator. So I'd go in to pay for the petrol, and the bloke basically says, anything else you need, mate? And I said, well, you wouldn't happen to have a radiator for an FE Holden sitting behind the counter, would you? As a matter of fact, you're joking. So he had a radiator for an FE Holden, but he had it under his house in Gundy, and we had to wait for this bloke to have his smoko break. So it's about 10 in the morning, and then he headed into Gundawindi and gave us the radiator. $20, happy days, we're off. So we headed out of Gundawindi and off. We're fine. Pulled up at Warwick, had a bit of lunch at Warwick. It was already early afternoon by this stage on the Monday. Certainly weren't going to be at work, and we were heading down Cunningham's Gap, which is part of the Great Dividing Range, and we noticed this vibration in the car, in the back of the car, and it was fairly significant. It'll be right, it'll be right. And then we got to Bathurst, and I think we were heading from Bathurst to Boona. By this time it was already late, it was getting on dark, and we rounded a corner and we discovered what the vibration was, because the right hand rear wheel and axle passed us, overtook us and headed down the highway, bounced off into the bush, bounced over a fence into a paddock, and we dragged its sorry ass off to the side of the road. So Henry and I get out of the car and we bolt down to the bloody paddock to get hold of this wheel and axle and come back up to the road, and no Grant. I said to Julie, where'd Grant go? Oh, he got in a truck, he's gone off to find a phone to ring his old man. Oh, fair enough. So Grant comes back, and then later on that night his old man shows up, but he shows up without a car trailer. He's just there to pick us up. Oh, that wasn't going to be good enough. We need to get the car home. We're not leaving it on the side of the road. There's people like us out there. We'll come back, there'll be nothing left of it. So we head on home, and then we turn around and go back to get the car. And like I said in the beginning of this story, I wasn't very bright. None of us were. And we grabbed Henry's next door neighbour, another mate of ours, Dave, and Dave used to work with us. Dave had a HB Tirana with an Opel 4-cylinder engine in it. And we've got this car trailer hooked to the back of this thing. We're going out to pick up the FE. So we winched the car on the back of the trailer at 2 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday, and we head for home. I had a headache that I have never been experienced before, ever again, or before that time. It would have killed a bull elephant. It was terrible. So my head's blowing up in the car. Everyone's giving me a hard time because I'm not feeling well. And we get this car trailer back to Henry's place, and then where Henry lived, it was a very steep hill where he lived. And Dave lived next door to him, next house up there. I was actually on the other side of the road. Anyway, that's all bullshit. So anyway, we make a couple of good runs at trying to get this car trailer up the hill, and we literally had to keep reversing up and give the Tirana the berries and hit the hill, and then it would run out before we'd get to where we wanted to be. But eventually we just gave up on the idea of trying to get it to the house, and we decided to unload it where it was. So we pull on the handbrake, get out of the car, drop the ramps. We start rolling this FE Holden, because we'd shoved the wheel and axle back in so I could roll. The wheel bearing had collapsed, by the way. Anyway, we started to roll this thing off the trailer, and as the weight shifted to the back of the trailer, it lifted the drawbar, and the drawbar lifted the back of the Tirana. The rear wheels came off the ground, and the whole shooting match rolled back down the hill. FE, trailer, HB Tirana, the whole lot. It's gone down the hill. What a night. And I think I had the next day off too. Oh, what a trip. But the thing is, you know, like my uncle used to always say to me, when you go travelling, don't stay in the Hilton, don't stay in the Shangri-La, stay in the shithole, because you'll remember it forever. You'll always say, remember that time we stayed in that hotel? Well, this was the same. We'll never forget that trip. It's been decades, and when we see each other, especially when the beer starts flowing, ultimately we always end up back at that story. And just to cap it off, I guess, the next year we took the same car, but this time we decided we were going to be smart about it. So we fitted all new wheel bearings to the back and checked the brakes, and we did a dingle ball rebuild on the engine. So we gave it a dingle ball hone with the block still mounted in the car, and fitted new rings and head gasket, and the radiator was fine. Everything was good, and it got us all the way there, and it almost got us all the way home, but the front wheel bearing let go this time, and nearly pitched me. I was driving and nearly pitched me into the trees. I ended up walking back to my dad's place, and I had an old EJ Holden bomber, speedway bomber, in the paddock, and they shared the same stub axle, so we were able to steal a wheel bearing and what have you not off it. So that was yeah, there you go. Some of the best moments of your life happen by accident. So if you've hung around, if you lasted this long, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and comment, and I'll catch you next time on Andy's Motorcycle Obsessions. Bye for now.